How's it going, everybody? And welcome to the 1IQ Football Podcast. Brendon and Sterling here with you. Training camp is in full swing here at the moment as we get ready for the NFL season. Lot of excitement here, particularly if you're a football fan. Sterling, what's your thoughts heading into the season?
I'm looking forward to things on my side of it. You know me, I haven't had as much free time, so I haven't been watching any of the other teams, but I've been seeing clips here and there of what's going on in Steelers camp. So looking forward to that. You know, we had a good team to close out last year, had a really good draft this year. Just a couple of small little holes that we got to worry about at the start of the season. If we can get past those little concerns, then it could be a good year.
Yeah, it is going to be really, really exciting to say the least. Obviously, football, one of the best sports in the world, particularly the NFL. It is just such a fun time. Obviously, uh, it's kind of silly season right now because every single team pretty much out here thinks they're going to be a Super Bowl championship contending team. Um, and yeah, it is just such a fun time. Obviously, every team is just looking at they're posting all the good things that are happening in training camp. Actually, I just recently read that Travis Kelsey of the Chiefs got into a little fisticuffs match at his own training camp there. That's never really a good thing to see, especially from your leader. If you're not a Kansas City's fan, you're kind of loving seeing that, but it's one of those things where it's very interesting to see right off kind of the first couple of days, already first fight breaking out. Nonetheless, it's
Yep.
the Chiefs as well.
Yeah. I don't mind seeing that. You know, I'd like to see the Chiefs sort of take a step back because they've been dominating the AFC for a couple of seasons now. So I'm glad they didn't manage to land DeAndre Hopkins as well because that would have made things very, very interesting.
Yes, speaking of DeAndre Hopkins, deciding to go and sign with the Tennessee Titans of all teams, which I know for me particularly, that came as a little bit of a shock just because when you were listening to D Hop the entire offseason, he said he wants to go to a team that has, Super Bowl aspirations. He wants to have a consistent quarterback. And when you look at the Tennessee Titans, that's not really fitting any of the criterias. Obviously, they have Derrick Henry there, so that's going to be really nice for D Hop to have because they're going to have a really good run game. And they have another young wide receiver there as well, who they drafted in the first round of last year's draft. That's going to be helpful. But the quarterback situation there in Tennessee is just so up in the air. It's kind of really hard to know what's going to happen. Obviously, they drafted Malik Willis last year in the third round, and a lot of people were extremely hyped on him. There was people saying that he might even be a first round pick, the first quarterback taken in that year's draft, but ended up falling to the third. And then this year, they ultimately take why am I forgetting his name off the top of my head? But the kid out of Kentucky, Will Levis, there we go,
Hmm.
who was also projected to be a first round pick. I think he probably should have been a first round pick, but ultimately the Tennessee Titans situation here at the moment in terms of quarterback is definitely a little bit more of an interesting one to say the least. Obviously, they still have Ryan Tannehill, who I think you and I both look at him and go, he's not a great quarterback, but he's also not a bad quarterback. He's just kind of in that realm of just middle of the pack.
Yeah, I kind of view him as like great value brand Kirk Cousins.
And even then, it's we both look at Kirk Cousins. We don't really view him terribly highly as well in the world of the quarterbacking realm. But yeah, so for DeAndre Hopkins to choose the Titans, obviously, I heard there was also a lot of rumors about him potentially going to New England, obviously the Chiefs, and you just kind of sit back and go, again, just the Titans. I guess we're gonna see. Maybe he looks at Will Levis and goes, "This guy is gonna be really good. He's probably gonna get the starts, and is
Hmm.
just gonna jump in and run away with it." But you know, Me personally, I'm struggling to see Will Levis immediately taking in. I know in my kind of scouting reports of him, he needed time. He was my number 4 quarterback going into this. So again, it's just kind of one of those things of going, okay, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. And what's your kind of thoughts on that whole DeAndre to Tennessee?
Well, and I mean, it's still Ryan Tannehill's team at this point. It's still his job to lose. So, yeah, it's interesting that D-Hop chose that. I can understand why he shied away from the Patriots. The Patriots do not have a good quarterback right now. They don't have a good team around him. Um,
That whole team is
and from
just
my
a mess.
understanding too, he was wanting to go somewhere where he was going to be the feature guy. And so that's why I think he went away from Kansas City because we all know Travis Kelce is the feature guy there. And so
Yeah.
you're going to be taking a back seat to Travis Kelce. Ultimately, I feel like the choice of Titans was him looking at it and going, well, that AFC South is kind of a wild card division right now. He's played there a lot. He's familiar with all of the teams. And I think he looked at it and went, maybe I can be that difference maker that will push the Titans to be the winning team. And so, and plus, I think he wants to stick it a little bit to the Texans. So he gets to play them twice a year now, and probably will put up some really good numbers against them. I'm a little surprised that he would choose somewhere like that over, say, the Jags, but I suppose the Jags didn't really have enough money to meet those pricey demands he had.
Well, and the Jags kind of also have a stacked wide receiver room. Obviously, they got and brought in Calvin Ridley, who we know had the season off last year due to gambling issues, which,
Hmm.
funny enough, a bunch of players this year are kind of getting sent to the slaughterhouse for that, which I guess this has never really been that much of an issue with the world of sports gambling now really coming in. We're finding out a lot more about this, but you would still think that if you were a competitive player, you wouldn't be betting on your own games. Like, I think it's fine if you're going to bet on other games that your team has nothing to do with. Sure, fine. Like, it's has no difference whatsoever. But,
I mean, I would say go outside your sport altogether.
outside your sport, yeah.
Yeah, because unfortunately, there's a lot of guys in the NFL. They're good buddies, they're good friends, grew up together, played college together, all this, and it sort of speaks to that like insider trading sort of mentality. So like
Yeah.
if you're betting on the same sport that you're playing, you could still have
Have
a
a little
sway.
bit of inside, yeah.
Right? You got a buddy on that other team that's like, oh hey, this guy's hurt. We're not really saying anything, but bet against us, you'll win some good money.
Yeah.
So that's why it should be like, I understand you want to gamble, fine. Go outside the sport you're playing in though.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not to say that you potentially, let's say, as an NFL star, can't just straight up like text someone in the NHL being like, "Oh, hey, what's like up with this?" And so, still probably find some stuff. But yeah, I agree. But yeah, it kind of that the Jags kind of already have that stacked room. I know they gave I'm forgetting the name of the player in the off season, not this off season, but the year prior to. He was the backup
Oh,
in
the one that you were like, what the fuck are they paying Christian Kirk for?
yeah, where
Yeah.
like I looked at Christian Kirk and said this is a guy who was a career backup, was already
Hmm.
behind DeAndre Hopkins in Arizona, and had never had 1,000 yard receiving season, never had over 10 receptions or 10 touchdown receptions in a single year, has always been one of those guys where I'm like, he is a really good number two, but he's not
Hmm.
necessarily able to elevate. Like, is he able to elevate himself to that number one role? Now, Calvin Ridley, on the other hand, this is a guy that can be a number one wide receiver. While he was playing with Julio, he was pretty much matching the entire time while he was playing with Julio. And when he was gone, and Ridley just was basically just like, yeah, I'm one of those guys. And so obviously D Hop kind of looking
Hmm.
there, he wasn't realistically going to be the featured guy. I know Evan Ingram signed a little bit of an extension there with the Jags, but yeah, it's
Yeah, he
interesting
didn't
to.
want to compete for that number one spot, is what it was. He wanted to be going in and be the feature guy.
Yeah,
And
which I get. At
yeah.
the end of the day, it's like DeAndre Hopkins, I think he's what, 32, 33, around that
Yeah.
age. Like and still one of the most dangerous wide receivers. I arguably put him in top 10 still, maybe even top 5, just obviously with some of these younger guys that are out there. Justin Jefferson, obviously, Devontae Adams, Jamar Chase, just a bunch
Hmm.
of these guys still maybe pushing him outside of that top 5 realm, but it's D-Hop. It's not like you're going to put him out there and go, "Oh, he's a liability." It's like no,
Exactly.
it's DeAndre Hopkins, and the guy that I was thinking of from last year's draft that the Titans drafted was Traylon Burks, who I
Hmm.
remember when they drafted him, I was going, okay, like he's a really solid player. He's one of those guys that you put the ball in his hands, and he's just dangerous. Like he was almost kind of, you know, Debo Samuel esque with it
Yeah.
in his hands, but so that's going to be probably really good for him to just kind of learn from DeAndre Hopkins. But again, very, very interesting to say the least. Another guy that I want to talk about is Justin Herbert getting the absolute bag here. And
Hmm.
obviously, in my opinion, Herbert, he's a top 5 quarterback, hands down,
Yeah.
in the league. Not even a question. Just what he's been able to do over the first 4 years. I think he's either like number 2 or number 1 in most of the stats for quarterbacks just in their first 4 years.
Yeah.
Just
But he's
breaking.
very much Philip Rivers 2.0 at this point
Do you think he is Philip Rivers 2.0 at this point?
because of the team that he's playing for. Yeah. Because that offense has put up the most points over his first 4 seasons in the NFL, but their defense has allowed the most points over the first 4 seasons of his career. And so that's
Yeah,
the problem. You can score 45 points all you want. If your defense is letting the other team score 48, you're still not winning a Super Bowl.
true. I kind of look
It's
at that.
tough.
I look at that loss last year against the Jags. That to me, that was completely coaching. That was
Yeah.
100% coaching, and that's why when obviously the season ended and the rumor of, oh, Sean Payton's looking to get back into the NFL, I said, go with the Chargers. Like
Hmm.
why would you not ditch Brandon Staley? It's not like he was a first year head coach that you're like, like this he was in his second year. He's already made a name for himself of making some questionable decisions of going like, I'm gonna go for this fourth down when it's 4-3 just because I'm bored. And analytics say like you've seen that happen multiple times with Staley and him not being able to get to that. It kind of felt like that should have been the move, but they didn't
Yeah.
do it. They did bring in Keelan Mon or more from the Cowboys after they let him go, which I thought was shocking because now they're allowing Mike McCarthy to do all the offensive play calling, and you just kind of sit back going, ah, yes, he was fired in Green Bay when he had a prime Aaron Rodgers, Devontae
Mhm.
Adams, and he was the play caller. This is clearly going to work out in Dallas, where they have Dak Prescott, Tony Pollard, and CeeDee Lamb as their number one weapon.
Yeah,
Yes.
I expect Dallas to be a dumpster fire, as usual.
The weird thing about Dallas is that on paper, their roster is still pretty good,
Hmm.
but they're going to probably win about 10 games, in my opinion. They're going to make the playoffs, and then they're just going to shit the bed, as they typically do.
Yeah, maybe. I mean that NFC East, like, I don't know. I don't know if they're going to win 10 games. Like that's the Eagles' division.
Oh, without a doubt. Like,
I don't think the Cowboys will be making the playoffs.
I do think the Cowboys are the number 2 team in that division, just
In that
solely.
division, yeah, but I don't think they'll have enough wins to take a wild card spot.
Fair. But
Yeah.
speaking of that division, another team that has very much been kind of in the talking points is the Giants, obviously, with Saquon Barkley. We know that the running backs kind of held a meeting together over Zoom, kind of talking about this whole situation. And obviously, I guess if you're going to talk kind of almost in the terms of like the strike that could potentially come from all these running backs going like, we deserve to be paid what we're worth, and Barkley kind of walking that, going like, okay, I'll sign this 1 year deal that's giving me a little bit more than what I would have gotten on the franchise tag, but for me to get all the extra money that I've been offered I have to have the best season of my entire career. Like, have you seen some of the details from that contract?
Not really details from the contract, but I've been seeing a lot of the rumblings of the running backs being upset that they're not getting paid. But I mean, I understand it. It's one of the more volatile positions where you don't have long careers typically.
Yeah, and uh, I'll get to that in a moment, but like basically
Hmm.
some of the details for Barkley's contract is that for some of the incentives that they've put on there, he gets so much money if he gets this many rushing yards. I think it's like the and the amount of touchdowns that he has and yards per game, they're all higher than his career high ever in a season. And you're looking back going like, okay, so Barkley is really betting on himself this season,
Hmm.
which you know uh, but going
I
back to
mean,
what you were saying with
the
the
problem with that though too is the play calling.
yeah.
If they don't call the plays to allow him the opportunities to get those goals, then he's going to fall short.
Oh, without a doubt. And when it comes to the running back market, you and I know all so well. Our teams, Chicago
Hmm.
Bears, Pittsburgh Steelers, they've always been a team with a very talented running back in the backfield. Obviously, for the Steelers, they had Le'Veon Bell for years. Bears had Matt Forte, and then we've kind of gone through these guys who have been really, really good in the backfield, but we've kind of just had them for their rookie deal and then decided to move on. For you guys,
Yeah,
it was the kid out of Pitt who
James Conner.
James Conner, thank you, and the
Yeah.
Bears it was David Montgomery. Now you have Najee Harris. We
Hmm.
have Khalil Herbert, and it's just kind of one of those things where you understand where it's like the running backs, you're going to be able to find a guy. Obviously,
Yep.
the Steelers took Najee Harris in the first round, and but they also have another guy who was undrafted who's playing behind Najee Harris, who's going to start to take away a bunch of his steps. You already saw that last year, and
Hmm.
it's probably only going to be even more so this year. And like I look at the running backs and go, I get it, you want to be paid what you're worth, but unfortunately, the value in that position is just not where it was because of how easy it is to essentially replace. Like I look at the Bears this year. They drafted Roshan Johnson in the fourth round, and
Hmm.
he's likely going to be a player that is going to be, here for his rookie deal, put up really good numbers, and then likely gone afterwards.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and especially if they want that big money. Same thing with Najee Harris. I know we took him in the first round, but at the end of his rookie deal, if he's wanting to be the highest paid running back in the league, the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to look at him and go, "Well, it's been a nice partnership, but we're going to move on then." If you want to stay here, take less money, and be part of this 1-2 punch running back, where you're splitting the carries, which will help lengthen your career. So you'll be able to make money over the course of 10 to 12 seasons instead of 4 to 6 seasons. Great.
Yeah,
But we don't want a ball carrier who's going to be in there all 3 downs, every series, every game of the season.
yeah, and one of the things that we're talking about, particularly with the Giants, is they went into the offseason with a crucial decision to make. And I think you and I and a lot of people pretty much outside of the Giants organization think they made the wrong move.
Hmm.
Because they walked in and said either we pay Saquon Barkley or we pay Daniel Jones. We don't really have the infrastructure here at the moment to do both. And quarterback at the end of the day is the most important position in football. But the contract that they gave Daniel Jones is a contract that you were going to give a top 10 quarterback.
Yep.
Daniel Jones, I don't think either of us would consider him in the top 25.
No.
Like you just look at the season that he had and you
No,
went,
not at all.
yeah,
And I mean, they made a mistake. I wouldn't have paid either one of them, honestly. I would have been shopping Saquon Barkley around last season
really?
with the way things were shaping up in the contract and see if I could get one of those quarterbacks that was drafted in the top 5 this year.
Yeah, yeah. And I look at Barkley, I go, he's more valuable to that offense.
He is.
And Jones definitely took a step up with the new coaching staff this year with Dable, but
Hmm.
even if you look at his numbers this year, they weren't that great. Like,
They weren't. I mean, I understand where the Giants were coming from. They were looking around the league going, who else are we going to sign?
yeah,
We're going to have to pay somebody almost an equivalent contract to what we're giving Daniel Jones anyway, with what was available out there. And they're like, their thought process was pay somebody the same amount who has to come in and learn our playbook and our system, or pay Daniel Jones and hope for the best. He
yeah,
already knows this. He's coming in with experience already. Maybe he takes another step forward. Unless they were able to get, like I said, one of those young quarterbacks in this year's draft, that was the only way you you have the option to make a move away. Because what else is out there that you're going to get for cheaper? Maybe an Andy Dalton or a Mitch Trubisky or something like that, and it's you know sure they might be a good placeholder, but they're not going to get you to the playoffs.
yeah. And this is kind of the weird thing with when we talk about like the Ryan Tannehills, the Kirk Cousins of the world, the
Hmm.
Derek Carrs, the Jimmy Garoppolo, where you're looking at these guys going, they're good enough to do stuff in the league. They're not necessarily going to ever win you either necessarily a playoff game. I know Daniel Jones won a playoff game. That was against the Vikings, who basically everyone knew going into the playoffs. They were the team that everyone was going like we want the Vikings, even though they were 13-4. It was like
Yeah.
we want them because they're going to be the easiest team to beat. You just saw the Giants dominate them. Then the Giants go up against the Eagles and they
Hmm.
get blown out of the water like it was nothing. It was like, okay, yeah, like you guys beat the Vikings, then you guys were the next team. But it is kind of one of those weird things of, yeah, you need these guys and they're placeholders, but it is kind of one of those things. Maybe you just, if you're the Giants, you try to swing for the fence and say, hey, we're instead of trying to get Daniel Jones, we'll just let him walk to free agency. We'll maybe try to get one of these guys, maybe like a Derek Carr. I think Derek Carr's an upgrade over Daniel Jones. The biggest negative with Derek Carr is as soon as he gets out of the pocket, he's basically shitting his pants running around. You know,
Or as soon as he gets sacked once.
yeah,
Yeah.
or a hint of pressure
Yeah.
basically coming his way. But yeah, I feel for the running backs because obviously you want them to get paid what they're worth. And I look at a guy like Saquon Barkley, he's one of the best backs in the NFL,
Hmm.
easily, without a doubt. Obviously, he's had some injury histories over the last 2 years, but this year he just kind of showed the NFL he's like, no, I am that guy.
Yeah.
And
And that's what it comes down to, though. It's those injuries. With all of the rule changes we've seen in the last 5, 10 years, it's it's resulting in more of those lower body injuries, which as a running back, you suffer an ankle injury, a knee injury, a hip injury. It it shortens your career. It ends your career in some cases.
yeah,
And that's why teams are afraid to pay that big money because you with the NFLPA and the way it's structured, you give a guy, a 3-year deal for, you know, $18 million and he gets hurt in week 3, blows his knee out, his ACL, and then he's not back until, year 3 of that contract, you're still paying him.
yep,
And then you're sitting there on the hook and you're like, okay, so we paid this guy and now we don't have a running game and we can't afford to buy a new running game. And so that's what teams are afraid of at this point. The only solution would be if these running backs are willing to bet on themselves and go, well, I'm going to put up the stats and I'm not going to get hurt. If I get hurt, then I'll only take 10% of my contract or 15% or something like that. But the NFLPA will not allow something like that to happen, which is good. You don't want to get hurt on the job and then have no income. But that's what teams are afraid of, and that's why we're not seeing these running backs get paid, and that's why I don't think that's going to change. Teams are going to keep looking at it and go, there's there's dozens of running backs every year in the draft that we can bring in, put into our scheme, have two different guys making half the amount of this superstar running backs, and we're going to put up almost as many yards and probably have a better all around team because we can invest that money in offensive line and wide receivers and quarterback and defense.
Yeah, you and me are very similar in this. I would rather have three running backs all in a rotation that
Hmm.
maybe combined get 1,400 rushing yards as opposed to having one running back who gets 1,400 rushing yards and then, the backup gets, 3 to 400.
Yeah.
I would take that 400 less rushing yards and have to pay each of these guys a collective maybe 7, $8 million as opposed to
Hmm.
the one guy paying him 10 plus. And
Right. See, and I'd look at it like, I'd love to see Najee Harris do what Le'Veon Bell refused to and now has come out publicly and said he regrets doing. And Najee Harris look at it and go, you know what? I'd rather win a Super Bowl than make, set the running back record for how much I'm making.
yeah.
And so then I'll take less. We keep this running back room we've got. I know I'm only going to be carrying the ball 70% of the time. So now I'm going to be able to play until I'm 32, 33, 35 maybe, instead of having to retire at 28 because my knees won't carry me anymore,
Well,
you
yeah,
know?
and
And so that's the hope is you get guys that are willing to do things like that and focus more on that team oriented and winning the championship instead of just trying to make as much money as they possibly can and walk away from the game early.
well, you look at Debo Samuel in last offseason, particularly when he was having his contract disputes. He was saying like, listen, like the money that San Francisco was offering me is fine, but the thing that
Hmm.
I'm pissed off about is that they're using me like a running back. And he said he's like a wide receiver. They have a lot longer of a career than a running back, and
Yep.
at the end of the day, Debo Samuel is a wide receiver that can play running back at an elite level. And, he finally said to them, he's like, listen, if you were going to pay me, the contract that you're offering me is fine. I'm
Hmm.
not going to be a running back though. Like I can do it maybe a few times a game, but that's about it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lead the team in rushes. And obviously they went out and got Christian McCaffrey, which funny enough, they have a wide receiver who can play running back, and then they have a running back who can play wide receiver. Perfect Mike Shanahan system. And you know what?
Oh yeah.
Scary looking team. Now they just need to figure out that old quarterback situation. And if you're a 49ers fan, you're looking at that Trey Lance trade that happened a few years ago where they sent 3 first round picks. Trey
Hmm.
Lance going to be healthy going into the season. They currently have him third on the depth chart behind Sam Darnold and an injured Brock Purdy.
Actually, the report I read, it's the other way around. Trey Lance is not ready yet. He's not going to be cleared in 100% until probably week 3 to week 6.
Mm.
Brock Purdy, however, has been cleared. He is 100% active, ready to go. He is their starter week 1.
Yeah, but
So,
even then, like some of the reports that I've heard is that
mhm.
even if he was healthy, and this might have got confused in my mind, is that if he was healthy, that he would still be third on the depth chart behind Sam Darnold. Which to me, I just go like, man, like to
I
send
mean,
3 first round picks and draft him third overall, like
his injury was substantially worse.
it
I
was,
can
yes.
understand them wanting to bring him back slow, and that's it speaks to that risk reward thing. Like, had he not taken that injury last year, then it's a very different Trey Lance that we know, and then that trade possibly is much more of a payoff. With that injury, that's the only reason that it looks like a bad trade, and you can't not make a trade because a guy might get injured.
No, for sure.
That's the tough thing, and I feel for that, but it's I get where San Francisco's coming from with that. He's not quite ready to go, so it's like let's stick him third. We've got Darno as a backup. Let's see if Brock Purdy's the guy.
Hmm. Well,
You
and
know,
how
and
do you not have Brock Purdy as your starter after what you saw from last year?
I mean, you can't. You can't not. Like I I'm salivating as a
Yeah.
Steelers fan. Like I'm going into week 1 going, "Oh my God, who's going to get hurt first? Is it going to be Brock Purdy or is it going to be TJ Watt? Is is Watt going to kill Purdy or is he going to kill himself trying to kill Purdy? It's going to be one of those two. That or Christian McCaffrey is just going to have get blown up and be done for the season in week one. But I'm sure one of those three guys is going to get hurt in week one.
Yeah, I guess you guys are playing the 49. Is that in Pittsburgh or San Fran?
It is. It's our first home opener in I think 12 years.
Wow.
We have not played week one at home in ages. And so that Pittsburgh team is going to be on fire that game, I think. And TJ, that's why I'm worried Watt's going to come out and hurt himself. He's going to come out running too hard, too fast, too early and blow his quad again or something.
Yeah, and speaking of your Pittsburgh Steelers, obviously they have a quarterback going into year two that, I mean, if you're a Steelers fan, you have to like what you saw from last year, but
Yep.
there's still question marks about him for sure.
Um, I don't really see much question marks about him. The
About
question
Kenny
marks on the
Pickett?
offense is the play calling.
Well, that's always going to be the major thing for
Yeah.
sure.
But I mean, I don't see much question marks with Kenny Pickett at this point. I mean, you look at how he closed out the season last year. He only lost one game. I think he only threw one interception in the final 9 games after leading the league in receptions for that first 5 games he played. He had a complete turnaround. You know,
Yeah.
he was protecting the ball. He was leading the team down for game-winning drives. Once Matt Canada released the leash and allowed him to, make some changes in the huddle as with what he was seeing. That was the key difference maker was once they took the reins off and let Kenny Pickett run the offense, things got way better. And that's all it's going to be this year is can Matt Canada throw away his paint by numbers playbook and let Kenny Pickett do what he does as a quarterback. He's good at reading defenses. He's good at audibling when it's necessary into safe plays. So yeah, go out there, call the plays you want, but let Kenny Pickett go. Yeah, they're playing press coverage. I'm not throwing a wide receiver screen to Deontay Johnson. I'm going to audible this and hand it off to Najee Harris outside and let him run it for 6 yards. That's all they have to do. And this offense will be on fire because of it. We've got George Pickens, who has probably the best hands of any, 2-3 year receiver in the league right now. And then you've got Deontay Johnson, who they paid. He's been looking really good in off season. I watched a lot of his OTA stuff. I haven't seen him in training camp, but I haven't heard anything negative. And then we have just a beast of a tight end room, between Pat Fryermuth and was it Washington we drafted? Is that it?
Just
Can't
let me
remember his name.
pull this up. I believe it's DeAndre Washington.
Yeah,
Uh,
so we got beasts there. Like there's no reason this offense can't succeed except for Matt Canada. Kenny Pickett has worked all off season here. He put on 10 pounds of muscle, so he's bigger, he's stronger. Um, I I think it's going to be a good year as long as Matt Canada can get out of his own way. That's going to be the thing. So this Steelers team is going to be one of two things. They're either going to be a double-digit win playoff team if Matt Canada can sit back and go, okay, I need to call NFL style, or if he gets in his own way, we're going to be a 500 team that misses the playoffs, fires our OC, and gets somebody new for next year, where we can finally start doing something with this young team.
yeah, and at the end of the day, that's going to be the big hope for the Steelers is you and I both are very much certain that Matt Canada is going to just continue to do Matt Canada and just continue to screw things up, which you and I said it last year. They should have moved on from him.
They should have, but I understood why they couldn't. Just because so much of that coaching staff is Matt Canada's squad.
Yeah,
And so it's not just replacing one guy, it's replacing 4 guys, 5 guys. I can't remember how many he's got with him. But that's the tough thing is you're replacing the almost the entire offensive coaching staff, not just the coordinator.
which
And so I
is
understand
a
why they
tough
didn't.
thing to do, and for
Exactly,
particularly for
especially
a
mid-season.
quarterback. For
Yeah,
what? Yeah, I was never thinking that they should do it mid-season. I think that's always a tough thing to do, especially with a
hmm
rookie quarterback, and it's tough to bring in a new offensive system for a quarterback from year 1 to 2. Like I've seen it too many times. I saw it
yep,
particularly last year with my year 1 to year 2 quarterback, and it's basically going back to year 1 anyways. And
yeah,
but yeah, Darnell Washington, just an absolute
yes.
monster of a man. Basically, a
Right? But I mean,
tackle.
and that's one of the differences with the Bears and the Steelers too, is like Mike Tomlin, he's not known for firing.
Yep.
He doesn't really fire guys. I don't think he's ever fired a coordinator. He lets them run run their plan for the 3-year contract we give them, the 4-year contract we give them. He says, "Look, I'm gonna trust you. Show me what you can do. If you can help me win a championship, then you're going to get to stick around. If not, then I'm going to move on when your contract's done." And so that's really it. People are talking about, oh, this is make or break for Kenny Pickett this year. No, this is a potential for a breakout season. I think he has all the talents to be that that quarterback from last year's draft, that player from last year's draft that elevates himself into that superstar caliber talk. And ultimately it's Matt Canada that's on the hot seat.
Oh, without a
It's
doubt.
you come in calling games like you did for the final 6 games of the year last year instead of the first 6 games of last year. If he can do that and just carry on from where we finished last season, then Matt Canada is going to have a job in Pittsburgh next year as well. Because if he can do that, as I said, they're a double-digit team. They make the playoffs. They likely win a playoff game. I see them going to at least the AFC Championship if Matt Canada can call that way. And he gets himself a contract, and we keep going forward with him. I don't
I,
want that, but I'd rather make playoffs and win playoffs than lose just so we can change our coordinator. You know what I'm
oh,
saying?
without
I'm
a
all
doubt.
about win
Yeah.
rather than tank to get rid of somebody or tank to draft somebody.
Eh, yeah, I know what you mean in that. I think AFC Championship game for the Steelers this year, even if Matt Canada somehow has this renaissance and just completely turns into a godly coordinator, I think that's insane because you have to worry about the Bills, the Chiefs, the Bengals.
hmm
You know, it, that's gonna those are the teams to beat. I just don't know if the Steelers are at that point yet. Obviously,
I
they
don't.
have the defense.
Yeah, I don't know if they're at that point yet either. That's what I'm saying. That this is the year where
They're gonna have to
Matt
figure shit
Canada
out.
has to show he can get them to that point.
Yeah.
Is what I'm saying. Like right now, no, they're not. Right now, I'd say they're probably about seventh or eighth in the AFC for talent and quality. But the potential is there for them to be one of the top 4 teams up there with the Bills, the Bengals, and the Chiefs, in my opinion. Obviously, I'm going to be biased because I'm a Steelers fan, but you know, I'm also speaking objectively. Like, we have a lot of good young talent on this team. We discussed this last year when we started our pod during training camps, and I expressed how my big thing with the training camp is I don't look at the good things that are happening in training camp. Those you throw away. It's
Yeah.
the bad things you hear out of training camp that you worry about, because those are the things that are going to carry into the season. This is the first year I can remember since before Antonio Brown started getting those concussions, where we're going into training camp and preseason, and there are no holdouts. There's no contract holdouts. There's no fights happening in training camp. These guys are not arguing with each other. They're not getting up in each other's faces. They're a cohesive unit already,
Yeah.
which is a good thing for a Pittsburgh Steelers team because it's such a physical style of football that they play. You have to have each other's backs rather than be at each other's throats. If you're fighting with each other, you're not going to have the energy to go out there and fight this Ravens defense. You're not going to have the energy to go out there and fight Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and knock them down a peg. You're not going to have the energy to go out and show that Deshaun Watson is not who he used to be.
Yeah, and I again, one of the other things I was going to bring up is that the Steelers right now are in one of the toughest divisions in football because I know as a Steelers fan, you hate the
Hmm.
Browns, and the Browns need to show that they can do stuff. But if we just think about before Deshaun Watson, left Houston, that last year in Houston that he played, he was a top five quarterback, and yeah, and our own opinions about his personal shit with all the other stuff. We don't like
Hmm.
him, but he's still one of those guys, and he's starting to have a few more weapons there. Obviously getting that trade for the wide receiver. I think it was Elijah Moore. I can't fully remember at the moment, but that team is gonna, I think, gonna be better than most people are giving it credit for. The Ravens, obviously, they're actually starting to give Lamar Jackson some more talent around him at the wide receiver spot, and
Hmm.
Odell Beckham, and that's going to be a tough team. I still think the Bengals, even with Joe Burrow, going to be out for the next couple of weeks. Hopefully, speedy recovery for him. Um, Never like to see that, especially when it's just non-contact calf injury. Just it's like it's a tough one at the end of the day. But
Yeah,
yeah, that division is insanely stacked. And
it is. It's a good division, definitely. But I mean, you know me. Like I watch my division much more closely than I watch anything else around the NFL.
yeah,
That's what Pittsburgh does. That's what they've always done well, and it's what Cincinnati has started to do, which has helped them become successful. You don't build a team necessarily to win the Super Bowl. You build a team to win your division. And then you go from there and you game plan to beat the other teams in your conference and then in the Super Bowl.
yeah,
And that is what Pittsburgh always does. They look and they go, how can we beat the Browns? How can we beat the Ravens? How can we beat the Bengals?
yep. Step one is
Well,
always making sure that you beat the guys that you have to go up against twice a year.
exactly. And the Bengals, much like last year, we talked about it. The Bengals are my only concern. And you laughed during training camp last year when I said that the Steelers were going to be the number 2 team in the division, and that they were. They ended up being there. Everybody was like, "Ah, the Steelers are finishing last place finally in this division." They have not finished last place in that division in over 20 years, I think.
Yeah.
Been a
My
long
caveat,
damn
my
time.
caveat was that when I said that last year was
Hmm.
is that obviously Lamar Jackson has to stay healthy for the entire year, and that obviously the Browns, they're not going to have Deshaun Watson. And so that's
True.
going to be a caveat. And this year, I would say it's more likely that the Steelers are going to finish fourth in the division this year than last year, just because Lamar Jackson is coming back. He has more weapons around him. The Browns are going to have Deshaun Watson for the entirety of the year. Do I think the Steelers are going to finish fourth in the division? No. But if there was going to be a year for them to do it, just because of how close it's going to be, they can still
Hmm.
finish fourth in the division with 9 wins. Like that,
Oh
that
yeah.
is that is an entirely possible thing to have happen. And this, yeah, they did
Yeah.
finish second last year, but that division did kind of just fall apart at the seams, with the
Yeah.
exception of
Which
Cincinnati.
which honestly, it often does.
Yep.
Probably the last 5 6 years. Since Joe Flacco was, entering the final seasons with the Ravens there, it's always been talked about that because they had Johnny Football and all these guys going through Cleveland as well. And every year it was, this is the year that Pittsburgh falls off. This is the year Pittsburgh falls off. Oh, Cleveland's going to be the team this year.
No.
The Ravens are going to win it this year. And every year, even since Lamar Jackson came in, he had one good season that
Yep.
he stayed healthy. Every other year he gets hurt. I see the same thing happening this year. He's going the route of Tony Romo, where it's like, yeah, he's great in September and October and November, and then he breaks his fucking leg, and you don't have him for December. You fall off that last month, and you miss the playoffs, or you make the playoffs and you get blown out. Like it just, you don't have Lamar Jackson. I think they made a mistake paying him. If you're a Ravens fan, they should have tried to move him, get some other weapons as a result, and move on because you're not going to have him come playoff time, even if you make the playoffs,
The
you
one
know, and
difference that I'll say about this year is that most of the time this is one of the things that I still think about Justin Fields, because
Mhm,
unfortunately their play style is kind of similar, where they're extremely athletic, and they really haven't had the best set of weapons around them. But now that both of them do have sets of weapons, I'm actually thinking that you're going to see less running from Lamar Jackson. I think, Harbaugh is going to say, we have offensive pieces now for him to throw
mhm.
the ball to. They drafted Zay Flowers, who is an insanely talented slot receiver. It's going to be, hey, Lamar, just hike the ball from the shotgun. One, look at Odell. If he's not open, look at Zay Flowers. If he's open, rip it to him. If he's not open, find Mark Andrews. You know he's going to catch the ball. I think you're actually going to see Lamar run the ball a lot less this year, just because he has more weapons around him to actually throw the ball to.
And I mean, if he does that, then yeah, he has the potential to be successful. I don't think he will do that though. And I think you're putting a lot more stock in OBJ than you should be. Like we got to remember he had a bad knee injury, which was the second time he's injured that knee.
Hmm.
Sure, he had an okay time when he was in LA. He got some yards, but then he got hurt again. And like he's older now. He's not the OBJ we saw going up making one-handed grabs from Eli Manning. Like it's not going to be the same Odell Beckham Jr. He's not going to turn around. I think the Ravens should have made a play for DeAndre Hopkins. That would have made me worried about the Ravens if they had D Hop in that offense as well. Without that, you look at again the teams in the division. You know, those other three teams, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, and Cleveland, all have either really good secondaries or potentially good young secondaries, when I'm talking about Pittsburgh. And they're going to know that Lamar Jackson is doing that. So you're going to have on all three of those teams edge rushers coming for Lamar. And so he's going to have to go through his motions fast. Teams are going to know they're going to be targeting OBJ first. So they're going to have tight coverage on him every time. He's going to have to win battles with cornerbacks in order to make plays. And then you've got Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews, who, granted, Mark Andrews is great on third and short. You're going to get a first down almost every time. But
He's
if
one of the
it's
best tight
first,
ends in the league.
he is. But if it's first and long, second and long, he's not as surefire a thing. Sure, maybe he'll get you 3 downs, but if it's 3rd and 9 and he gets you 3 yards, you're still punting the ball. Mark Andrews isn't always downfield. He's more of that middle linebacker area where he's catching those balls. And Zay Flowers, he's young. He's going to make mistakes, I'm sure,
Mhm.
just like every rookie
Young
wide
receiver,
receiver does.
without a doubt.
And then if he happens to be paired up against a veteran cornerback, we're going to see Lamar Jackson throwing more interceptions if he decides to try to hang in the pocket. And that's just it. He's going to have guys like TJ Watt and Myles Garrett barreling down on him, and he's going to remember all those injuries he's got. He's going to make mistakes, or he's going to have to run the ball.
Yeah,
And
and
that's
Lamar Jackson still running the ball though is a problem,
mhm.
because he's one of the most gifted athletes out on the field. And
Well, was. I mean, you got to remember, he's had 2 lower body injuries.
yeah,
Look at Dak Prescott. He cannot run the ball like he did when he came into the league. And he was one of those guys who everybody's like, oh man, he's really good at this pass and run thing, and Lamar Jackson, same. You're lucky at this point. Justin Fields has not had one of those significant injuries. So honestly, Justin Fields is the premier guy right now for that run pass sort of quarterback. I think Lamar Jackson has to make that leap into a pocket passer for him to be successful. If he cannot accomplish that, then that Ravens team is going to fall short of all these goals and all these expectations. He has to take that next step and become a pocket passer, or they're not going to succeed.
yeah. My big thing with the Ravens this year is that obviously I sat there and I said you have to pay Lamar Jackson, because ultimately the alternative is we kind of talk about the same situation with the Giants.
Mhm.
But the thing is that the Ravens or the Giants didn't have a guy who was an MVP caliber player who, is one of the most dynamic quarterbacks in the NFL. And you're looking at a guy, for instance, in Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud, Anthony Richardson, these guys here at the top of the draft coming into this year. You're looking at all of them, and Bryce Young. A lot of us look at him and go, he was unbelievable at Alabama. He was worthy of a top 5 pick without a doubt, no questions asked. But he's still a rookie quarterback. You don't really
Mhm.
know what you have in him, and smaller stature, very similar to a Tua Tagovailoa, Kyler Murray, and we saw what happened with both of those guys the last 2 years. Both being the smaller statue guys and getting hurt, and so it's kind of taking that risk reward. But I feel more comfortable with the Ravens doing it than I do with the Giants. And but it
Yeah.
is a very big prove it year for Lamar Jackson. If Lamar Jackson struggles even with all the weapons that he does have now, that is a
Mhm.
big, big red flag.
And a big problem for them going forward because they gave him that longer term contract. I look at the Ravens and, being that I see them a lot every year, I would have tried to get something for Lamar Jackson, and I would have moved forward with Tyler Huntley because I've watched, and honestly, that team looks almost identical when Tyler Huntley is behind center as when Lamar Jackson is, except Huntley can't quite run the ball as much, which, as we discussed, is probably a good thing for the Ravens. They need a quarterback that's not going to run the ball quite as much. Huntley has burned the Browns and the Steelers more often than Lamar Jackson has since Lamar Jackson came into the league.
Yeah, again, you and I, we're just gonna have to see with this Ravens team because
Oh,
I,
definitely.
I I still think that Lamar Jackson can be a premier throwing quarterback. Like you just look back at his college days. There's not many quarterbacks out there that can throw for 50 touchdowns over their college career, but also rush for 50. That's what Lamar Jackson
Mhm.
did, and he's just never really had a stable of wide receivers. Yes, OBJ is older and he's been injury prone, but he's going to take up a lot of the targets because people are going to go, oh, it's OBJ. Like, let's be honest here. Patrick Peterson is going to be lining up against OBJ,
Yep.
and that is going to be the matchup. And
Oh yeah, yeah. For those Pittsburgh games, it's going to be veteran on veteran, and it's going to be rookie on rookie
yep,
because the way camp's been going, there's a lot of talk with how impressive Joey Porter Jr. has been that he may be able to unseat Levi Wallace for that second receiver spot or second cornerback spot, which means he would be covering Zay Flowers at that point. And
Zay Flowers plays mostly out of the slot though. So is he going to move into nickel or is he going to stay
probably
outside?
I think I mean we don't have a premier nickel defender at this point. We lost that in the offseason here, and so it's gonna. I think we're gonna see a lot more man coverage from that Steelers defense in the secondary at least. And so they're not going to do so much worrying about the zone nickel. It'll be more, this is your guy. If he goes into the slot, you're covering him in the slot.
Yeah,
I think is what we're going to see from that defense.
that's fair. Have him roaming around a little bit more, and
Yeah. Yeah, since
we
we don't
both.
have a premier nickel guy, like if you've got a guy who's really good at playing that nickel corner spot, then you drop back into the zone a little more often. When you don't have that, like I think it's less than 20 snaps combined the entire secondary on Pittsburgh has with experience in the nickel spot. And
Yeah.
so it's really going to be who's going to step into that role. And if nobody does, we're going to drop back into man coverage more often.
Yeah, and the one thing for a young corner is it's really really tricky because I experienced this last year with Kyler Gordon where it was the
Mhm.
Bears drafted him to be an outside guy, but he also has a lot of upside as a nickel. They've strictly said to him this year, you are a nickel corner. That is going to be because again, most of the time in the NFL, you're playing with a nickel out there. Like
Yeah.
that's just the way that the NFL is these days. I think it's something like upwards of 70% of the snaps a nickel is out there. And
Mhm.
last year, the Bears had Gordon on the outside, they also had him on the inside. And, I definitely like to see a young corner stick to one of those spots early just to develop because, for instance, if you're like a Jalen Ramsey, obviously, hopefully that he is able to get back out there after his ACL tear. And, hopefully speedy recovery for him. But that's a guy where you're like, yeah, just line up literally wherever the best corner is, whether he's inside or outside. Jalen Ramsey is going to be a-okay. But
Yeah.
I'd rather see Joey Porter Jr. either stick to outside corner or nickel, just because it just helps their development just a little bit more. But
Yeah, I would like to see that too. And you never know with this, with like I said, with this defense through training camp and preseason here, we may see a guy, and maybe Levi Wallace makes some strides in that nickel spot, and that becomes his role. We still have DeMonte Kazi as our backup safety to Minka Fitzpatrick, who is very talented, who we could see him coming in and dropping down into that nickel spot more often and be playing more with three safeties instead of three cornerbacks. Like there's a lot of options for that Steelers defense in the secondary right now. It's they're trying to find where everybody's going to be.
yeah, and
But
when
ultimately, it comes back to I, I I don't see the Ravens succeeding is what it comes back to.
it
You
it's
know,
gonna
I
it's gonna be very, very interesting to see. I got a little bit more faith in the Ravens than you do.
yeah.
The biggest thing that I look at with the Steelers, just from this, outside objective or
Hmm.
not objective standpoint, is the Steelers. They have a young quarterback with a questionable offensive coordinator. They have, two wide receivers that are both young. One has some drop issues
Hmm.
and the other still needs to prove himself in the NFL. And then you bring in Allen Robinson, who the last 2 years has been more of a I'm just kind of playing in the NFL as opposed to being that former, top 10 wide receiver that he used to be.
Hmm.
So it's going to be interesting to see with their good tight end room. Offensive line definitely improved with the Broderick Jones sign or draft pick. The defense stellar. You got your two edge rushers, in Watt and the guy that you just paid him.
Highsmith.
Thank you. And
Yeah.
you have the best safety in the NFL in Minka Fitzpatrick. Linebacking core I still think can probably get a little bit better down the middle.
Yeah.
And your secondary or other than Minka Fitzpatrick is still kind of young and developing, so we'll see with that. But overall, yeah, you know my opinions on the Steelers. Like
Hmm.
I've never had anything against the Steelers, and I think they could be a good team. It's just that division, man. You know,
Hmm. It's
yeah,
always a tough division.
yeah,
It has been for years and years. There was a stretch there where it was only a two team race. It was the Ravens and the Steelers, but the Bengals have really improved. The Cleveland Browns keep trying to force their way into it by, paying big name guys, big contracts. It has yet to work. They have one good year,
that was
uh,
with Baker Mayfield.
right? And that was it though.
Yep,
Every other year it's all hype and all flash, and it falls apart by week 5, week 6. Falls apart before the trade deadline almost every year.
yep.
And honestly, like I get Deshaun Watson was a phenomenal quarterback. He was a top 5. But this was almost 4 years ago now that we're talking about that.
Yep.
Like the league has changed dramatically in the last 4 years. It's not the same. And the AFC North is not the same division as the AFC South.
Yeah, you could run
It is
away in that
very
division.
different spot for him to be playing. And I don't think he's going to be a top 5 quarterback anymore. When you look around the league and you've got guys like Mahomes and Josh Allen, like it's
Well, Joe
Justin
Burrow,
Herbert,
Justin
you
Herbert,
know,
Aaron Rodgers
Justin
is
Fields,
still.
I think, is primed to make a big leap this year, and I think he propels himself into that top 10 conversation this year for sure. And honestly, I'm not entirely sure Deshaun Watson will be able to be in that top 10 conversation by mid-season.
It's going to be really interesting. Obviously, he only played what the four or
I think
five
three
games
games.
last
Yeah,
year.
3 or 4
Yeah,
games last
it
year.
you can't judge him off of those performances because I don't even think he was allowed to
No,
practice with the team until like no midway through November. So,
no, and to be clear, I'm not judging him off of those performances.
oh
I'm
yeah,
judging him
yeah,
off of the fact that we
he's
have
so
not
rusty.
seen
Yeah,
performances in so long from him.
yep. No,
You
I
know,
I
and
agree.
it's hard for these guys to just come from college ball one year to playing in the NFL the next year. The difference in speed and the difference in how
Just
the
different of
transition is,
talent.
right? Like it's hard. Not many guys can do that. And then to go and sit and not be able to play in that league for 3 years, not play any football really for 3 years. It, I have my
It's
questions of
tough.
how he's going to bounce back from that.
Yeah,
You know,
I agree with you. Breaking news: veteran corner Eli Apple is signing with the Dolphins. So yeah, no one really cares about that. It's fucking Eli Apple. He gets burnt more than toast.
right? It's like
Yeah,
great. So now Diggs can burn him while he's in Miami.
yeah,
Big
exactly.
whoop. Yeah,
Yeah.
like it is what it is. That doesn't impress me. The Miami Dolphins, like they're another one of those teams that they've got good pieces. They look good on paper,
But can they put it
but
all together?
can they put it all together? They've got one of the best, in my opinion, young head coaches in the league.
Yep.
He's very dynamic, but they've got a very questionable quarterback situation right now with the injuries that Tua suffered last year. It's they're they're not going to be able to make those strides. I don't think. I think what we're going to see this year, in fact, is probably more of a middling. We're going to see the Jets and the Dolphins come closer together, while the Bills just still continue to climb.
I think honestly, for that division, I think the Jets win that division.
Really,
I do.
you think Aaron Rodgers is going to be able to make that much of a difference?
Just like if you look at the Jets last year, they were a young team. Obviously, they have the rookie of the year both on offense and defense.
Hmm.
And when you look at that team, my biggest thing I said was going into the offseason, they need to just shore up the offensive line just a little bit. Maybe just one more piece in there, either young or veteran, to just really solidify that and get themselves a quarterback. And, I got to witness this guy for too many goddamn years
Hmm.
in Aaron Rodgers. And last year, like, yeah, he had his struggles from time to time, but even if Aaron Rodgers plays to 80% of what we've normally seen Aaron Rodgers do, that is still career highlight years for 90% of the quarterbacks out there. And the Jets kind of have this momentum right now of where they're just on the right track. They have the pieces there. They're a young team with an established guy. And we also talk about, Aaron Rodgers going there. He already knows the offensive system with Nathaniel Hackett coming in as the OC. It's going to be basically everyone else coming in there and Rodgers saying, "Listen, you're going to do this. You're going to do this. Let's go win." And I have to say, like, I do think the Bills are a little bit more vulnerable than what people are giving them credit to. Obviously, Josh Allen, he's a top five quarterback. He's one of the best in the league, but he also led the league in interceptions last year, where he was just so reckless. He played with such reckless abandonment. He gives a lot of Brett Favre vibes of where he's great, but he also makes a lot of mistakes. And I think that Bills team, you see them get beat and you can see they're gonna beat the teams that they should beat, but then against the teams that they can't beat, you saw them. They lost to the Bengals in the playoffs, and it was one of
Hmm.
those things. They needed to go beat the Bengals because if they didn't, they needed to try to beat the Chiefs in there, and they just couldn't get it done. And I think you're gonna see the Jets come in and really, really take over that division. It's gonna be close. I think it's gonna be kind of last week deciding, who's gonna ultimately win that division. But I think the Jets are gonna take it.
Yeah, that's fair. I just question Aaron Rodgers' attitude. Like really, what the Jets have done is they drafted a drama queen of a quarterback. That showed flashes in his first year and then fell flat last year. And so they went, well, let's go get another drama queen that's just 20 years older than him. Maybe that'll work. And
Yeah,
really, I think
but
it worked for him
but
in
this
Green
drama
Bay for so
queen
long.
is a first ballot Hall of Famer though.
He is. He is. No, don't get me wrong. I'm not taking away from what he's done in the past. But the thing is, he's not Aaron Rodgers of 5 years ago or 10 years ago. He's not that young gunslinger anymore. He and he's going from, a lot of people have pointed this out, and I think it's true. He went from Wisconsin news, where he was the god, the savior, he was the guy all the time. He's going into New York, and
Yeah,
that New York press eats guys alive, eats superstars alive. If he cannot go in there and dominate, he's going to start getting that chip and that attitude, and they're just going to dump all over him constantly. And I don't think at his age he'll handle it. I think
he's
he'll go,
just
you
gonna
know what,
smoke some
fuck this.
ayahuasca and just get over it.
Well, I think he'll just go, you know what, fuck this. I've made enough money. I've won championships. I don't need this trash. And he's just gonna his attitude is going to spread through the rest of that team. And I think that is where my question marks around the Jets are. Can Aaron Rodgers truly come in there and be a leader and motivate these guys?
Which
Or
it
is he
sounds
going to
like it
go
has
in?
been.
It could, but the thing is, he was able to do that in Green Bay in his younger years because he was proving it. He was able to prove it, and he was able to move those things around and make it work. The last couple of years, that wasn't happening. And we saw a lot of that young talent coming in and just going, well, fuck, he doesn't throw me the ball. He doesn't give a fuck about anybody but himself. Why am I going to go out there and put the effort in for him? And I think we might see some of that in New York because he's going to come in there and he's going to behave like he's still playing for the fucking cheeseheads. He's still playing in Green Bay where the only thing that city has to cheer about is the Green Bay Packers and is Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah,
You're going into New York and these fans are going to be like, well, you know what? No, fuck you. We've got dozens of other professional sports teams that, don't have a dick at quarterback, a dick leading the team. And so
yeah, but
that's my
that
concern.
dick even at
He
like
has to rein his personality in for the Jets to be successful this year.
yeah, I I've learned this too many times to try. Like the last few years I've been saying like, oh, all this drama is gonna make the Packers this much worse than that, and every year it bites me in the ass. And the same thing, I can't say it against the Jets because the Jets actually have a much better constructed team than the Green Bay Packers have the last few
Hmm.
years. And him and Garrett Wilson, honestly, that's going to probably be the number one duo, like quarterback and receiver, I believe. I think, honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if I see Garrett Wilson get 16 plus receiving touchdowns this year and go upwards of like 1,600 receiving yards. It wouldn't shock me whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see for sure. I am curious to see what's going to happen in that AFC East with the Jets especially, and I don't think the Bills are going to fall off as much as a lot of people seem to be thinking.
Oh, I don't think they're going to fall off. I just think they're not going to win the division. I think they're
Yeah.
still going to be a playoff team. They're going to have the first wild card spot, in my opinion. Like
Yeah.
it's going to be one of those things where it's like, oh, the Jets somehow are 12 and uh what would it be now? 5, 12 and
Yeah.
5. And
Yeah.
oh, the Bills are 11 and 6. Like that type of situation, or the Bills are 12 and 5 and the Jets are 13 and 4 type
Hmm.
situation. There's still going to be a really really good competitive team, and who knows, maybe Haley Steinfeld might unlock something for Josh Allen, or maybe drop him down a peg. We don't know what's going to happen with him dating a
Yeah.
superhero.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not as concerned about Aaron Rodgers as you are. Again, I know you had to deal with him for the last almost 2 decades, and then Brett Favre before that. So you've got some PTSD around that for sure.
Yeah, I do have a
I'm
sharp object beside me right now, so
Yeah,
if we want to see a mass suicide on screen,
right. I'm
man,
more looking at it, and I'm looking at what's happened over the last decade, seeing other veteran quarterbacks that spent their whole career with one team going somewhere else. And I don't I don't see shades of Peyton Manning in this. I don't see Aaron Rodgers succeeding. I see more of what happened with Brett Favre actually. It's almost a mirror of that career at this point. I see him going to the Jets, and you know what? Maybe they surprise some teams early on, but I think the holes will start to show in that team as the season wears on. And I don't think Aaron Rodgers has it in him to carry a new team in a high medium market to the playoffs.
My question is, do you think Aaron Rodgers goes to the Jets, plays there for a year, retires, and then signs with the Vikings, plays there for a few years, and then sends a dick pic to a reporter that gets leaked online?
That would be, I mean, with the types of drugs he's doing, the dick pic is not out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah.
And I mean, hey, who knows that if Kirk Cousins doesn't work out in Minnesota, they're going to be looking for a quarterback soon. So
Yep.
maybe that would be really funny if he directly mirrored that previous career, because then everybody's going to look at Jordan Love and go, "All right, well, we'll see you in New York in 10 years, buddy,"
Yeah. Fuck.
and then Minnesota after that.
Again, sharp object near me.
hmm
I don't need a third fucking Hall of Fame quarterback, and it sounds like there's a lot of struggles for Jordan Love here at the moment coming out of
Yeah.
Packers camp. Um, yeah, that NFC North division, it's a weird division because it's not the worst division in football, but it's not necessarily far off because the team to beat is a team that for years and years was just utter dog shit. But you're also looking at the Lions going like they're going to be better and they should win the division, but they're still the Lions and they're probably not going to be that great. And then you have the Vikings who are very much on a downturn, and you
hmm
have the Bears who they're going to be better. I don't think they're going to be a playoff team. I think if the Bears are able to get 7 wins, it's a very, very good season. I think they're probably going to be around that 6 to 8 win mark this year, and the Packers, who fucking knows what they're going to be because we don't know what Jordan Love is,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting.
Honestly, I look at that division and I describe it as the most middling division in the league this year. You know, like you got your best divisions and your worst. This one, like I see every team having almost an identical record at the end of the year. You know, two wins separating first from fourth.
Yeah.
You know,
I, I
this
I would be
division is
shocked if a team in this division had anything more than 10 wins.
I'll be shocked if any team in this division hits double digits, honestly.
Yeah.
You know, I do think the Bears again are primed. They've had three really good back-to-back drafts. They've been building, they've been growing, they've been improving every year. As you pointed out, Justin Fields finally has some significant weapons that he can utilize. You still have a good running back room, and your offensive line, while it hasn't improved as much as some other teams, there have still been improvements there.
I think if you look at the improvement for the offensive line for the Bears, you looked at it like this. You had a rookie left tackle last year who was
hmm
drafted in the 5th round, came out. He was one of the best rookie offensive linemen in the league last year as a 5th round rookie in Braxton Jones. The question mark for him this year is can he improve? And the biggest areas of improvement for him were strength because there was just times where he would just get bullied and strength is the easiest thing to fix for an offensive lineman. It's going, okay, eat some more chicken breast, go pump some iron, go do some squats, boom, it's going to be fixed because his technique was very clean. And he was still able to beat a bunch of guys. And then you add in Nate Davis, who was part of that Tennessee offensive line, who was so good at opening up holes for guys like King Henry, and just doing that. And then obviously Darnell Wright. This was a guy that I looked at and I was like, man, if the Bears can get him, I'll be extremely happy. Obviously, they traded back, and then you know they selected him. You saw me at pick number 10. I was, yeah, it was the player that I wanted at pick number 10.
Hmm.
And I'm extraordinarily happy with that. Obviously, getting DJ Moore, DJ Moore and Justin Fields have just been a highlight reel for the training camp so far. Like the Bears, literally every single day have just tweeted a video of Fields and Moore just lighting it up together, and you're sitting back going like, okay, yeah, like this is I'm enjoying it. But again, me
Yeah,
being me, I am again, being in that sports broadcast world, I've learned to see it from an outside perspective. I need to see this to believe it. And Justin Fields, in my opinion, is the quarterback probably on one of the hottest seats in the NFL.
yeah. And I mean, you've got to look at it the same way I am. Like I've been seeing a lot of the Steelers camp too of Kenny Pickett and George Pickens and Kenny Pickett and Deontay Johnson just lighting it up. And I'm like, that's great, but this is training camp.
It means
Like
dick. There's the pads
exactly.
aren't even on.
Sure, it looks fantastic, but how's it going to look with a full secondary back there defending against you guys with edge rushers coming at the quarterback at the same time? We don't see that yet. That's that's why it's like, yeah, it's wonderful to see and it's exciting to see, but will it translate to the season? And so,
Exactly. I put almost zero stock into what you see and what you
mhm,
read during training camp and preseason. Once we get to week 4 of the regular season and we've seen at least 4 games being played, that's when I go, okay, we know what teams are like. We know how they're going to be. We understand realistically what's going to be there. And once we get to that point, then we can start to go, okay, like it's blah 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 blah, and
yeah,
have that. But for me, it's always week 4 or technically week 5 after 4 games. You know what a team and realistically the results are gonna be, and I'm excited about it. And funny enough, as I have Twitter opening up, of course, what do I see? DJ Moore and Justin Fields pass and
mhm.
reception looking great, and making me have happy trouser moments. But yeah, I am one of the, I don't even know how to describe it. I'm pessimistic Bears fans out there of going like I'm
Yeah,
always,
you're very much the opposite of me. I am always optimistic about my team, and giving them the benefit of the doubt. You're always just like, yeah, the dog shit again, but I'm still gonna cheer for them.
yeah. And it's because
But
as a Bears fan, I'm 26. I've been cheering for the Bears since I was about 6, 7 years old. And so it's been about 20 years of me being a fan of this team. And it has been a roller coaster of emotions with unfortunately more lows than highs. It's been a roller coaster of where it's been like up, down, and then we're just going to kind of ride this year a little up and down, and then up and back down. And so, again, you just kind of get callous to the point of going, yeah, they're probably going to be dog shit. We'll see. Justin Fields, okay, we drafted him. Please, God, don't fucking ruin him. Please, God, please, please. This is the best quarterback we've had talent wise come to our team since I've been alive. Don't ruin him. And yeah, it's pain. It's pain.
it's yeah, and unfortunately for you, it's going to be painful this year as well. I think any fan of a team in that division period is going to have a painful season because, as I said, it's going to be such a middling division. Every week is going to be up and down for every one of those teams. I I really think it's going to be Bears, Vikings, and Lions fighting to see which one of you can hit that 9-win mark.
Yeah.
That's what it's going to be. One of you is going to finish above 500, and that's it. It's going to be a fight to see which one of you can get there. Who can win 9 and who else is going to be in the 8 and under club.
For me, I don't think it's gonna be as painful for me as a Bears fan because I have that realistic expectation. I'm seeing Bears fans out there going, "We're going to the playoffs. We're gonna be like." I realistically see this team as like a 12-win team, and I'm like, I want what you're smoking because like I want to have that feeling in my life. I look at this team again. They're a 6 to 8 win team. And
No.
if they get to that 8 wins, I'm looking at that. I go, this is a great season. You have two first round picks. You are not ready to take that next step yet. That's why you have these two first round picks. You have
Yeah.
a bunch of picks in the top 50, and that's what you need to get these young talent and to still grow. And that's how you build a team. If the Bears go and win 12 games this year, and are just this lightning rod of a team, I'm going to be more worried and upset than I would be if this was an 8-win team, because it's like you're jumping too quickly. Like a lot of people are going to say, "Well, didn't that happen to the Eagles?" No, the Eagles went from a team that was kind of hanging around that, 6 to 7 win mark, and then they bumped up to that 8 to 9, and then they had that big jump where they went to the Super Bowl this year. And I would
No.
rather have that type of a jump, from, that 8-win mark, as opposed to going from, a 3-win team to a 12-win team. I saw that with Trubisky, and then the 2 years after, we immediately went right back down. It's that roller coaster up and then down and then just middle of the road. And it's painful. So I would rather see that small jump. And that's where I think a lot of Bears fans need to really, really understand that is the small jump sometimes is better than the instant jump to go back down. Instead of going 12 steps up to then go 8 steps down, give me 3 steps up. And then next year,
Yeah.
3 more steps up. And then you just kind of hover around, similar to what your Pittsburgh Steelers have done, of just kind of
Mhm.
staying in that realm of consistency, as
Yeah.
opposed to
Yeah.
being
I mean,
jumpy.
to be fair, we only dropped down to about that 500 mark. That's sort of our basement,
Yeah, but you've
and then
also
we
had a
go
Hall
from
of
there.
Fame quarterback for the last,
We did, yeah.
yeah, for years. And
19 years, yeah.
yeah, and
No.
that is always going to pretty much help a team stay at that consistent above 500. And your
But
defense
that
the
being
last few years has really been carrying the team.
Oh yeah, that being said though, if Justin Fields is the guy that a lot of people are hoping, then that big jump could be a good thing because maybe that's him taking that step finally. I
Yep.
think it's tough for the Bears this year because that NFC I still believe it's the Eagles conference to
Oh,
lose.
oh yeah, yeah.
I feel like even now in training camp I'm like, yeah, Eagles are going to be the Super Bowl champs this year.
When
I'm
when you
fairly
look at
certain.
the NFL, you look at the AFC, you go, okay, it's, you got the Chiefs, you got the Bengals, you got the
Hmm.
Bills, the Jets, you could just keep going on that list. The Chargers, the Broncos. When you look at the
Exactly.
NFC, you're like, okay, you got the Eagles, you got the 49ers,
You got the Eagles.
you got the 49ers. And
Right?
then,
That's pretty much
you'll
all it is.
hear a stupid Cowboy fan, you got the Cowboys. It's going, no,
No,
you shut up, go back to your hole. And
exactly. Yeah, sit down, son.
yeah, because you
And even the
can't.
49ers, the 49ers have those question marks at quarterback. Like, yeah, Brock Purdy showed flashes last year, but like, there's no guarantee he's going to come out and look that good again this year. Especially after elbow surgery.
Yep.
Like we don't know that, but yeah, that's the thing is with there's so few teams in the NFC that are of that championship caliber. The Bears sitting with two first round picks have got to be looking at it and going, well, if we go into week 7 and we're sitting at, you know, 5-1 or 4-2, do we try to move one of these first round picks to fill the hole that gets us to the NFC championship?
No.
I know you say no because you want this slow burn climb, but as a team looking to make as much money as they can, they've got to be looking at that going, if we're, solidly out in front in our division at that point, and the rest of the NFC is still looking so weak behind the Eagles, do we make a push for it? Do we send one of these firsts away and maybe bring in somebody to shore up the defense or to fill a gap on the offense where we're lacking, and that I know you would absolutely hate it, but that's a very real concern that the Bears could run into this year if they start the season successfully.
Oh, without a doubt. And the number one area where I would see the Bears go out and make a trade would be for an edge rusher. You know, you look at a guy
Mhm.
like Chase Young is a name that is very hotly contested, but I look at it, I go, there are this is a talented edge rushing group coming out next year. Jared Varsey, Florida State, he's not as polished or as good as maybe a Will Anderson was coming out this year, but there's just
Mhm.
good, consistent guys. And let's say, for instance, that Carolina pick ends up being a top five. Well, then, you have that right there. And I personally think the Bears are going to end up with two top 15 picks.
Yeah.
And
Well, yeah, with you saying 6 to 8 wins, that's exactly where they'll end up.
yeah, and to me, in my opinion, going after a young guy, because if the Bears, let's say with the Commanders or whatever the fuck their name is gonna be with this new owner, they've said they might go back to the Redskins, and who knows? But let's say you trade away, the Bears send their pick that they own to the Commanders for Chase Young, which I think would be a massive overpay, and
Hmm.
you then have to immediately pay Chase Young a big contract, and as a Bears fan, I already saw what it was like trading for a guy mid-season and knowing that it's a really difficult adjustment period for any player at any position. I would rather have and bank on a young guy with, for instance, that Jared Varsey,
Hmm.
and hoping that he's going to pan out, and as opposed to sending that away and then instantly putting that on the books, because a top 10 pick or two top 15 guys in the first round, guess what? You have 5 years of a really cheap contract with those guys. And obviously, you have to worry about Justin Fields if he takes that next step. You have two wide receivers, that are looking for extensions in Darnell Mooney and Chase Claypool. You just paid Cole Kmet. So, and I think more Bears fans need to understand that. And I think this Bears management staff wants to go down that route of being like, listen, we have cap space, we have money. Let's not burn it all away though right now. We can still going in next year, next offseason, I think the Bears are still like
Hmm.
third in cap space. They have like
Oh
70
yeah.
million dollars even after all the money that they spent this year. And that's I think more Bears fans need to get
Hmm.
on that train as opposed to not.
Well, I think that's partly where you might be overvaluing Chase Young as well, though.
Oh,
Like
without a
yes,
doubt. I don't think you send a first round pick for Chase Young. I just more or
well,
less use
and
that as an example.
I don't think you have to pay him quite as much as you might be thinking either, especially with all the cap space you have. Like you got to look at this, and if you guys are in that position before the trade deadline where you're like, we could make a run for this if we can get our defense a little bit stronger. And so then you go, well, let's send our second pick and Chase Claypool to the Commanders, get Chase Young over here, sign him to a 3 or 4 year deal for that middle, slightly higher tier edge rusher.
Probably
You
$20
still
million
end
dollars
up,
this season.
right? You still end up with a top five pick where you can then draft another edge rusher, and boom, just like that, you have that dynamic 1-2 on both sides
Yeah.
rushing, and your defense is set,
Oh,
you know?
yeah. And for me, I even wrote an article about it where I said, you need to, like, if the value is right for Chase Young, for instance, if the Bears can trade, let's say, two fourth round picks for Chase Young, do it now,
Oh,
right now.
oh, hell yes.
And
Any team, if you can get him for 2/4. I don't see the Commanders giving him away for less than a second and a mid to upper tier player, I think
yep,
is what it's going to have to be. Um, I mean, that being said, I think at this point the Commanders are still overvaluing him because the Steelers were looking at a trade similar to that. They were
yep,
looking at a second round pick and one of our wide receivers possibly going over there for Chase Young, and they weren't biting on it. And that was when Pittsburgh went, all right, we're going to restructure Minka Fitzpatrick's contract, and we're going to re-sign Alex Highsmith. There, we don't
yep.
need Chase Young now.
And you know what?
And
That
all
was a
that
great
did,
deal for Highsmith.
It was a great deal
Yep.
for Highsmith, great deal for Pittsburgh, and a great deal for the rest of the league because all that did was lower the value of Chase Young because that's one more team that is no longer going to be in the running for that and bidding on that guy.
Yep.
And so that lowers his value for some of these other teams that are looking at maybe sending something over there in a package. So, I mean, that could be a thing that the Bears end up looking at.
Oh, without a shred of a doubt. And again, I just need to see how the season's going.
Oh,
And
definitely.
yep.
Yeah,
But
this is like week 5, week 6, week 7 we start looking at that
getting
because I
closer to the
mean,
trade deadline.
yeah, the deadline's not till week 8. I don't see many teams making that play for Chase Young before then unless they have a crippling edge injury where they're like, we have no edge rushers left. We need someone. We'll give you a first for Chase, please.
Oh my God, if they sent a first round pick for Chase Young, even if Chase
I,
Young
I
turns into a like let's say the Bears week 3 trade for him and he gets like 10 plus sacks, I would still be pretty pissed off for a first.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't see the Bears making that mistake unless they just get super excited. You go 7-0 to start the season, and you're like, okay, let's build this team for a championship now.
Yeah.
That's the only way where they get so overexcited at a super hot start that they're like, yeah, here, take your first, give us Chase Young. We want to keep winning.
Yeah.
That, and I honestly I don't see that happening with the way your Bears schedule looks. I think you're much more likely to be about a 3-4 or a 4-3 at that trade deadline point.
I agree with you. But as we start to get closer to the end of the podcast, obviously we've been talking a lot about some of the rookies. Who would you say is the rookie that you're most excited about for your Steelers, and a rookie that is on an opposite team that you're also kind of looking forward to watching?
I mean, it's obvious for my Steelers. It's Joey Porter Jr. Hands down. That was the guy pre-draft that I was looking at them going like I was saying trade up to get him, and then they traded up, and I was like, holy fuck! I think he might have traded too high to get Joey Porter. You didn't need to go quite that high, and then they got Broderick Jones, and
Which was a great move by them to
it
jump
was a brilliant move.
right in front of
Like
the Jets with the
right,
Patriots.
and while sure I'm excited about Broderick Jones, but I think he's already so talented. I'm not really worried about him in any way. I think he's going to come in and he's going to do great. He's going to be tested really well early because I think we've got 3 straight weeks of top 5 edge rushers that are going to be coming at him. So he's
Yeah.
going to have to prove himself fast.
And I
But
get
Joey,
it. Like the offensive linemen are never sexy picks in the first round, but they're like good picks.
they're essential,
Yeah, and same.
especially that blind side pick. You have to protect your quarterback.
Yeah,
Especially a young quarterback, someone like Kenny Pickett who's a little more mobile. You don't want him taking a bad hit and having a hip or a knee go wonky on him early in the season, and then all of a sudden you take that entire dynamic out of his game for the rest of the year.
yeah,
So that was a good pick, but it's definitely Joey Porter Jr. for me. Um, the fact that they got him at pick 32, and so you look at it and it's basically a straight up trade Joey Porter Jr. for Chase Claypool. That is an upgrade in my books.
yep,
And that's what I'm excited about. He's been looking good in training camp. As I said earlier, there are talks. He's competing with Levi Wallace right now for that number 2 corner spot. I'm hopeful that if he's able to win that Levi Wallace doesn't get too butthurt about it and just sort of falls back and goes, you know what? We've got a good secondary. I'm fine with being the number 3 guy, and I'll do what I can and maybe start getting better at that nickel defense and find my role here. I
yeah,
hope that's the case. If not, trade that bitch away. If he starts causing a stink, then trade him away.
yeah.
We don't need that negativity in the locker room because a rookie came in and outshined you. Like, deal with it.
Oh yeah, and
Um,
the fact that I just want to talk about the fact that the Steelers got Joey Porter Jr. at pick 32. Like I'm just looking
right?
at this, the Commanders, like the number one corner obviously was Devin Witherspoon. That was a no-brainer. Seattle picked him at 5. No one was
Yeah,
shocked by that. Then Emmanuel Forbes was the number second or the second corner taken by the Commanders at pick
yeah,
16, and then the Patriots get the consensus by a lot of people had, Christian Gonzalez as the number one. He was my number two, but still,
Yeah.
you could interchange him and Witherspoon, and then obviously so Gonzalez was there. Manuel Forbes should have never been taken as the second corner. And then you
No.
also had Deontay Banks, who is not better than Joey Porter Jr., also get taken before him. You're just kind of sitting back going like,
I kind of had Banks and Porter, like you had
they were
Witherspoon and
interchangeable. Yeah.
yeah, they were like 3, 4 sort of there. So yeah, once those three guys were off the board, that's when I started getting worried. I was really glad the Commanders made a donkey pick because I was like, oh, beautiful. That you guys took one of the later corners off the board. There weren't as many teams in that final 10 picks that were in need of a cornerback. So after we got to that 21st pick, I started going, okay, this is possible. My only concern was the Chiefs. The
Yep.
Chiefs were the team I was looking at that was like, oh, they're going to swoop in there. They're going to take Joey Porter Jr. from us. And then they didn't. And I think I texted you as soon as that first round was over, I was like, you can write down what the first pick in the second round is right now. I guarantee you it's Joey Porter Jr. The
Well,
Steelers aren't even going to take 3 seconds off the clock. They're going to be like, Steelers are on the Joey Porter Jr. Thank you. That's pretty much what it was.
well,
Like
because
they
the
knew right
entire
away.
off season, it was the Steelers. It was like, okay, they're gonna select Joey Porter Jr. at pick 17.
Yeah.
Obviously the family's there. They know him. He's good enough to be taken 16th overall. But you're
Yeah.
also sitting there going like, they could take a tackle. They need offensive line. That was one of the areas that they struggled with last year. They obviously traded up for Broderick Jones. I was about to
Hmm.
say Braxton Jones. I was like, no, that's my left tackle,
Hmm.
mine.
And
Um,
I think if that trade had not been available, we would have seen Joey Porter Jr. go at 17.
yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
And I think
But
most of
when
us
that
sat
trade
there.
became available and they looked at it and they went, I mean,
You gotta you
blindside guy to protect Kenny Pickett, our year two quarterback, like he's going to be the cornerstone of our O line going forward. We've already got our center in place. We have to. We can't say no to this. And if we lose Joey Porter Jr. in the process, it's a risk we have to take because we
eh,
have to protect this offense first.
exactly. And we always talk about the quarterback is the most important position in sports, not even just in football, in sports. But then you look at it and go, there is some debate of whether it's edge rusher next or a tackle after that. But for me, like if you can get yourself a premier tackle to protect your franchise quarterback, you're gonna take that any day of the week
Yeah.
over a corner. Doesn't matter if
Yeah.
it's Jalen Ramsey coming out. Like you are going to go
Exactly.
after the blindside protector. And again, the fact that they got him at 32, you're just sitting back going, "What the fuck, man?" It's like the Eagles then getting Jalen Carter and then just casually a little bit later getting Nolan Smith. You're like, you already had the best D line in football. Did you really need
Hmm.
to get a generational D tackle and a insanely speedy mobile edge rusher off the like fuck you, Howie Roseman. Like, come on.
Right.
Granted,
Yeah.
my
Yeah. And I
team
mean, with
was
that,
the instrumental of giving, the Eagles Jalen Carter, but potatoes, potatoes.
right. And granted, if Jalen Carter had been there for the Steelers to take, I think they might have taken him instead of um, Broderick Jones, just because our D line is aging a little bit with Cameron Hayward sort of just showing up with his walker at training camp every year now, going, "Please draft somebody to replace me. I can't do this anymore."
Yeah.
um, but
Fuck,
no,
how
I
old is
think
he
that
now?
was
Is he like
oh God, he's like
36?
yeah, 35, 36, I
Fuck.
think. He's up there.
Yeah.
But that's honestly pretty common for Pittsburgh D linemen. They end up playing into their mid to late 30s. We saw it with I believe he's up for Hall of Fame this year. Fuck, why am I drawing a blank on his name?
James Harrison?
Aaron Aaron something. Aaron it's
Yeah.
slipping my mind right now.
Yeah.
But either way, like it's a common thing in Pittsburgh. I don't know how they do it, but their D line, they have that health and that length. But yeah, I'm
Except
excited
if
about
your
Joey
name is
Quarterback.
TJ Watt. Then it's like you have talent, but you're kind of a glass cannon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm hoping he doesn't get hurt.
Yeah.
Um, but going back to what we were talking about, as far as a player on another team, um, I mean, I am really excited to watch how the AFC South quarterbacks play out. You know, because we're going into you got Ryan Tannehill, you got
CJ Stroud, Anthony
yeah, Trevor
Richardson,
Lawrence, and then Stroud and Young both got drafted into that.
Richardson.
Richardson got
Yeah.
drafted into that division, so it's going to be interesting to see there. But I think for like an individual player, I'm really looking at Jackson Smith and Jigba. That is going to be interesting because that Seattle team and Geno Smith surprised everybody last year, you know, and DK Metcalf has sort of been the guy, and he's now got somebody who can take a bit of that attention off of him. And so that receiving core in Seattle, if Geno Smith can maintain his play this year that he elevated himself to last year, one of those two guys is, I think, going to be a top three in receiving yards at the end of this year.
Yeah, you
I'm not sure which one.
unfortunately, yep. You unfortunately took the guy that I was gonna choose, so I'm just kind of looking through the draft board. But I have
Hey,
to
there's nothing wrong
completely,
with us having the same guy. Like there's a lot of people, and it was a close call between him and Bijan Robinson for me, just because Bijan came in and they gave him this massive contract as a rookie running back, and I'm
yeah,
looking at it going, why are you paying him that much? He's a rookie. Like let him run out his rookie contract and then pay him that much if he proves himself. Like that was kind of a donkey move, I think, on their part, paying him that much that early. But I think the upside is just greater for Smith and Jigma. You know, in that Seattle offense, the way it looked last year, it was just missing one thing. You know, they had that explosive big powerhouse of a receiver. They had a
DK.
mediocre running game. They had
Well,
their
Kenneth
surefire.
Walker before he got hurt, that Seattle running
eh,
game was back to almost that beast mode era, but then he got hurt and then
Fair.
kind of went
Yeah,
back to it.
I was
Yeah.
more thinking the back half of that season, it was much more mediocre after. And then they had I'm drawing blanks on names. The guy who's been with Seattle forever
Oh, Tyler
catching
Lockett.
Tyler Lockett, you know, like
Yeah.
sure hands, sure first downs, and just an Iron Man of a player because he plays so smart. He doesn't take hits. You know, that is it's always good to have a guy like that. He'll catch it, he'll get the first down, and he'll be like, well, sure, I could run for 5 more yards and get blown up, or I can just go down here and we can start a fresh set of downs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you got this new explosive player in that offense. It's just
And
if
Smith and Jigba
Geno's
is such a pristine route runner that
yeah,
DK Metcalf obviously is that big explosive guy. Tyler Lockett, very speedy, good route runner. But Jackson Smith and Jigba, you have all three of those guys out there. It's just like, how do you cover all of them? Because
right?
you just can't.
Well, teams were already having trouble just covering DK Metcalf. You're now not going to be able to double Metcalf anymore. You're
No.
going to have to separate that. And so that is why I'm not sure which one of them is going to break out big this year. It's tough for a rookie to do that. And so I think that it might be more likely that we see DK Metcalf put up career numbers this year because he's no longer dealing with that double coverage. So he's going to be able to go up, get that ball, break that first tackle, and then get those yak yards. And that's going to be the thing. He is just going to tear it up in those yards after catch. You know, he's going to be putting up record numbers there. And it's down to Geno Smith, though. Like I said, was last year just a flash
Fluke.
for him of this is what I could have been coming out of college, and now I'm going to go back to what I was when I was with the Jets and the Broncos? Or is this him going, look, this is what I always said I could be, and nobody ever gave me a chance, and I'm going to
Yeah.
keep going and keep building on this?
I got drafted by the Jets. This is what I was truly meant to be as a quarterback. And
Exactly,
I
exactly.
I sit there and I look at those three wide receivers. I could very easily see each one of those guys catch over 1,000 yards. Like not even a question. Be like, yeah, if you were to sit me down right now and say, DK Metcalf caught 1,600, Tyler Lockett was around that 1,200, and Jackson Smith and Jigga was around that 1,100, I'd be like, that seems low.
No,
Yeah. Like
no.
it wouldn't shock me. What would shock me more is that if one of those guys didn't get over 1,000. But again, it's going back to, is Geno Smith going to be able to take that step?
Yeah, and I think it's much more likely, like, if we see one of those guys below 1,000, I think it's Tyler Lockett, simply
Yes.
because he's
He's
aging,
older.
but he plays smart, like I said, and he's going to be much more willing to go, like, you know what, I'm fine with finishing the season at 800 yards. I got us almost every single first down we got on every key drive this season because I got the ball, got that first down marker, got down, and that's why I stay healthy.
Yeah, totally. Um, it's our brains are very connected on that one there, buddy. It
Yeah.
was not too much of a struggle there. I guess for me, the rookie that I'm most looking forward to watching this year for the Bears is probably Tyler Scott, the wide receiver that we drafted in the fourth round out of Cincinnati. Very speedy. You know, Daniel Jeremiah actually said he reminds him a lot of current Chicago Bears wide receiver Darnell Mooney and what they do. And watching their tapes, they are very similar type of players, which you always kind of look at and go, you never really necessarily want to draft a guy already similar and does the same job as a guy that you currently have. But, you know, you have both Mooney and Claypool up for a contract. DJ Moore, he's on the team for the next 4 years. He's not going anywhere. But,
Hmm.
Tyler Scott, he has this opportunity to carve himself out a role. Even if the Bears extend both Mooney and Claypool, there you have four guys that are just constantly interchangeable of coming in and doing a lot of great work with each other. And he's already been making flashes in training camp. And for a team that you looked at last year in the Bears and said they have one wide receiver in Mooney, as soon as he went down, you're like, they're fucked. They have nothing. To now this year going like, okay, they got four, maybe even five guys in that wide receiver room that you can depend on. And then obviously you bring in Robert Tanya and Cole Kmet is extended for the long haul. You're like, God damn, like in one off season, they completely changed the entire outlook on what the weapon situation is looking like for the Bears. And,
Hmm.
Tyler Scott, I could have gone either him or Roshan Johnson, the other player that we drafted in the fourth round, running back, of Texas, who played behind Bijan Robinson, who was a guy that you mentioned. I'm also looking forward to him, but yeah, Tyler Scott for me definitely the guy. Could have gone with one of the three defensive options that we did pretty early on: Zach Pickens, Gravon Dexter, or Tyreek Stevenson's. But I just think Scott is probably going to make, like, I'm really excited to watch him just because the Bears. You want to know a stat that is kind of shocking that most people don't realize? The leading receiver in total stats for the Chicago Bears in receiving yards is like around 5,000, like all time.
Yeah.
And I just sit back and I go, that's disgusting. Like, whatever another disgusting stat for the Bears that makes me want to vomit every time I see it is that we've never had a 4,000 yard passer, yet we're the oldest fucking franchise ever.
And that's why you don't have a receiver with 10,000 yards passing,
Yeah,
because you don't have that quarterback yet.
yeah. I'm hoping.
But
Fields has said he wants to end that tradition this year.
yes.
So, get on the knees, burn all
Hmm.
the scented oils, pray to all the gods. Please, fuck, just let it happen. I'm waiting.
Yeah. And honestly, I think that's a good pick for you to be excited about too, because that was an important pick for the Bears because they brought in DJ Moore, which almost immediately knocked Chase Claypool to that number 3 spot, which I think you're going to see him struggle, just like he did with Pittsburgh when he got bumped out of that spot by George Pickens. He did not like it, and it didn't go well. And having that extra depth at wide receiver is good.
Yeah.
It's really nice to have. Like I
It's not a
look
it's
at
never a bad thing to have.
no, no. I mean, I look at Pittsburgh. We talked about Deontay Johnson and George Pickens. Allen Robinson, Calvin Austin, Miles Boykin. We still have Gunnar Olszewski. Like we've got a stacked wide receiver room if somebody goes down.
Yeah.
And it's good that you guys have Scott because having mirror images on either side of the field in Scott and Mooney will not be a bad thing if you guys decide to ship Claypool out, which honestly I think we'll see happen. I don't see the Bears extending both of them. I see Claypool likely getting traded for flip for another draft pick
The only
for
reason I
somebody else.
don't see him getting traded is because if he struggles to perform, there's not going to be a team willing to trade for him, and his contract's up at the end of the year, so it's going to be no. I think the Bears, no matter what, Claypool is going to be with them for the entirety of the season because I just don't think there's going to be a team willing to risk that trade of going, that halfway mark. They saw that
Hmm.
he already struggled with trying to learn a new scheme halfway through a year, and I'm not going to entirely blame that on Claypool. It's tough regardless just to do that, and you know,
I
it,
mean, it is tough, and you're right. Like the value's not going to be there. You guys aren't going to get like a 32nd overall pick
no,
for Chase Claypool.
we'll be
But
lucky if
that
to get a
being said,
seventh.
there are teams out there that are a little bit lacking at the wide receiver. Injuries happen, so that's always possible. And there's sometimes certain teams and coaches out there that like to put familiar faces together, and I could potentially see the New England Patriots going, "Hey, will you guys take a third or a fourth for Chase Claypool? Bring him in here to play with Juju Smith-Schuster." I
Yeah,
could see the Patriots doing something like that for a cheap that could potentially be a number two wide receiver that is already familiar with a wide receiver partner. I could see something like that happening, and
yeah,
so that might be the route that your Bears end up taking. And we know that Ryan Poles likes that draft capital, and
that he
so
does.
grabbing an extra third or fourth is not a bad thing. You can get some really talented players in the third and fourth rounds.
Yeah, totally agree. I just still think Poles, he's looking at Claypool, he goes, I really want to give him a year because obviously I sent that 32nd overall pick
Mhm.
for him, and if I were to just trade him away halfway through the season, whether he's having a good season, whether he's having a bad season, it's just one of those ones where you're like, it's it would I think it'd be a tough pill for him to swallow because that's immediately saying I completely fucked this trade.
Well, yeah,
And
it would be a tough pill to swallow, but I mean, there's no harm in admitting you made an error. And
yep,
if Scott comes in and outperforms Claypool to the point where you're like, well, we got to put Scott in as our number three receiver, which bumps Claypool to four, which we know is going to start some grumbling out of Claypool. Do you really want that guy who's maybe not going to be as happy and will be vocal, causing some issues in your locker room, maybe? You know, he he,
I
he
still
gets a
think
catch.
he sticks around for the season just because
Yeah, I'm just saying it. Like if Scott does well, I think that is when you see Claypool possibly being shopped around.
yeah, yeah.
Because as vocal as he is in his distaste of being a number three, I think he will become toxic if he gets bumped down to a number four on the depth chart.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see. Obviously
Yeah,
Claypool is definitely the guy on the hottest seat in that wide receiver room between him and
yeah.
Mooney. But yeah, the guy that I'm looking at that's not on the Chicago Bears was ultimately my favorite player in the actual draft itself. He was my number one pick, Will Anderson, edge rusher, going to Houston. This dude, when he was with Alabama always puts out D linemen and line or and corners, but the one thing that they've always never really done much of was the edge rusher spot. But Will Anderson, he was a different animal. Like this guy is going to be so goddamn good. The fact that the Texans got CJ Stroud and Will Anderson, they basically said we are getting our cornerstone piece for our offense and our defense. And
Mhm.
Will Anderson, I could very easily see going out this year. and just basically saying, I'm gonna just casually put up 12 sacks, have a, all pro year, defensive rookie of the year, make it look easy, and just I'm looking forward so much to watching him just because he is just such a fun player to watch. The Terminator, his nickname. I'm excited to see him. And I think Houston, there's not a lot that you could say with Houston that they've done right over the last couple of years, but the fact that they got CJ Stroud and Will Anderson, they traded away that capital with Arizona for next year's first round pick, which was a ballsy move, but you got your number one quarterback, you got your number one edge rusher, the top 5 picks, those are kind of the areas where you try to get those guys anyways. So,
Yeah.
I mean, why not do it? And he is such a good player, man. I'm so excited to watch him.
Yeah, and I mean, we talked about it on draft night, what a crazy move that was by the Texans to pull. But ultimately, I mean, for any team, like that, they were looking at the basement anyway. They
Yep.
were looking at it going, I mean, we finished near last this year. We're probably going to finish near last next year. Like, if we can pull this off and just get our 2 top 5 picks now, then maybe we don't finish dead last next year.
And that's just exactly that. Having these two guys, in my opinion, CJ Stroud was my number one quarterback,
Mhm.
and the fact that the Texans got him at 2, and then they got my number one player in the draft in Will Anderson, it's like, man,
I
you
know.
could not have not you could not have done a completely polar opposite of the Houston Texans of the last few years than what you just did there.
Yeah.
And
However, if they finish dead last, they're going to be a laughing stock.
which is a
And
possibility. And
Was it Arizona they made that trade with?
yeah,
And Arizona's going to be sitting there going, "Fuck yes,
well,
first overall pick."
right now the Cardinals, they could very easily finish with picks 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And you know what? I still look at even if the Texans do finish in, let's say they just give them a top 5 pick, if CJ Stroud shows that he's a quality quarterback and Will Anderson goes out there and has a beastly type season, I don't think many people are going to be worried that much because it's going, you have, again, I like to use the terminology of building a house. You have to lay the foundation before you can start putting up the walls. And if your foundation is CJ Stroud and Will Anderson and they're good,
Mhm.
you're not going to worry too much about it.
No, no, it'll just be tough if they finish that near the basement at the end of this season and then they go in and go, "Fuck, now we got to wait another year before we can really start adding some more key pieces. We can add filler pieces for now with
Yep.
this draft,
They
but
might
we
be
won't
able to
have
get
another."
DeAndre Hopkins next year when he's a free agent. Send him back to Houston.
No, not a chance.
I
I'm
know.
pretty sure they tried calling him this year and he saw it and probably didn't even answer the damn phone.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
probably
There's
he
no
he
way
he
he's going back.
answered that and then he ended it with his ass. He was
Yeah.
like, "No, yeah, thank you."
Yeah.
No,
There's
I'm
no
just
way
saying
he's
that for
going
the
back to that
memes.
organization. Like I said, I still think that's why the Texans or the Titans ended up being the team he went to, so he could kind of stick it to the Texans a little bit.
It's gonna be fun to see what he does there.
Yeah.
Any game particular this season that you're looking at going like this is gonna be the game that I really want to make sure that I'm available to watch?
No, at this point, it's just week one. I want that home opener. I have not gotten to see Pittsburgh play a home opener in so long that that's what I'm looking forward to. I want to see them come out week one at home and get a win. Because, I mean, they do often win in week one. You know, they come out pretty fired up with a good game plan because they've had so long. And I think that's going to happen this year, too. I know the 49ers have a great team, they have a phenomenal defense, they have a lot of weapons on offense. But I think that front seven, especially the edge rushers and Cam Hayward, are just going to put too much pressure on Brock Purdy and Christian McCaffrey for them to have their dominant outing to start the season. So I
And
think,
the 49ers typically struggle in the early stages of the season. They lost the
yeah,
fucking Bears last year, week 1.
I mean, that was like a fucking mud bowl, though,
Yeah, the monsoon game.
right? Like that was a brutal game. I mean, I hope we don't see that in Pittsburgh. I'm hoping we have some nice weather for that game. But at this point, yeah, that's the one I'm looking forward to the most, just to get the season underway, see what kind of play calling I have to look forward to the rest of the year, basically,
Yep.
because that's going to be a very telling game for Matt Canada because it's one of the better defenses. And if you're not going to be able to call a game against the 49ers, then you're not going to be able to call a game against the Ravens and the Bengals.
Yeah.
And that's, again, comes down to those teams, and those wins are going to be what makes the playoffs for us.
Do we play each other this year? 'Cause I don't think we do.
No,
No.
no, not playing the NFC North this year. It's the NFC West that we're playing this year. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That makes sense.
I know, because as soon as the schedule came out, I was like, "Ooh, can I go to the Niners game?" Oh, wait, it's at home. Oh, what about the Rams, and the Seahawks? And
Yeah.
I just don't want to be in Seattle on New Year. That doesn't seem like fun to me.
No.
And
No.
then the Raiders tickets were just outrageously expensive because it's Sunday Night Football.
Yeah, and in fucking Vegas as well. And I'm pretty sure it's relatively close to the Formula One Grand Prix as well.
Yeah, yeah, it is relatively close to that. But if it had been an 11 a.m. game in Vegas, I feel like the prices would have been significantly cheaper.
Yeah.
But because it's a Sunday Night Football game, prime time, yeah, it was just astronomical. And
Watch it
then
gets flexed out, and it's now an 11 o'clock game.
I don't think it will.
I mean,
I
if the
really
Raiders
don't.
are bad enough, which they could be,
It honestly, that rivalry, it's such a historic rivalry. The NFL, like, if they were going to flex it out at any point, they would have flexed it out of the Christmas Eve set last year because it was prime time then too, and the Raiders were looking like dog shit at that point. But because they look at it and they go, it's Steelers Raiders. We have to have it prime time when we can.
yeah.
And so I don't think they start flexing the Sunday night games until week 10.
What week is it? That the Raiders
That
and
one's week 5 or 6, I
oh
think.
yeah, then it's not going to be flexed.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
pretty early in the season. It was it was no, it's in September. I think it might be week 4.
Yeah, they just immediately flex it. Both teams are 0 4. They're like, we don't want to deal with this shit.
Yeah, I'm pretty
Uh,
sure it's week 4 here. Let's take a quick look.
yeah, no, it's
Yeah,
not going to
September
be a
24th.
flex. Yeah, if it's
Yeah.
in September, there's zero chance unless one team decides to racist storm up or what. I don't even think that. Fuck, the Commanders still played primetime games.
Look at the Broncos. The Broncos played more primetime games than anybody last year, and they were garbage.
To be honest, though, that was insanely funny, though, to watch them
It
just
was.
constantly shit the bed on prime time and then seeing all the memes afterwards of every single time the Broncos lose. Hey, Broncos country, let's ride?
Yeah, we still riding?
You see Sean Payton's comments about Nathaniel Hackett?
No.
He went out on a presser and said the coaching job last year was probably the worst coaching job I've ever seen. He said that publicly at a Denver Broncos presser. Just casually
I,
goes like, "Wow."
Yeah, Sean Payton's never been shy that way though. He's said shit like that.
Yeah.
He's kind of like the John Tortorella of the NFL coaching.
Yeah, but Sean Payton's actually a good coach.
He is
Yeah. Tortorella, he's just a fucking dick who just says shit.
just a
And
loudmouth.
yeah, who gets fired, goes to a new team, has like a gets them to the playoffs, pisses off a star player, team does bad, they fire him, goes to the new team. I'm surprised he still keep getting. When he got hired in Philadelphia, I was like,
Yeah.
why? Like, yeah, he's probably a good fit for Philly, but like, he's been fired by half the fucking league at this point. Like, why do you keep giving him jobs? That's a whole other thing with the NHL is that they just constantly recycle head coaches. The fact, like, it's rare when you see a head coach in the NFL get a second opportunity. There's only
Hmm.
ever been one to be a head coach of 3 teams, and of course, his first head coaching job was with my team, Lovie Smith, and thank God he was there with the Texans, giving my Chicago Bears that first overall pick, which was instrumental. But yeah, I think this is probably a good time to end. We've been chit chatting here for just a little over 2 hours. And yeah, thanks for hanging out with us. Every Saturday we'll be posting these podcasts. So thanks again for hanging out with us, Brendon and Sterling. Again on the mics with you here. We'll be back chit chatting more NFL football. Just hang out with us. If you liked the video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you're enjoying all the content. We post a ton of stuff here on 1IQ, from ranging from just football to baseball to eventually going to be hockey when that season picks up here again. But yeah, thanks for hanging out with us.